Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the 2025 Class Signing Day Recruiting Capsules here on the Skull Session Recruiting Podcast, brought to you by BuckeyeHuddle.com. Stay with us throughout the day as we recap and break down every player who signs with Ohio State in the 2025 class, as the Buckeyes are looking at landing another big-time class. This class was pieced together, we'll say, on the offensive line. It wasn't always smooth. There were some ebbs and flows to it for sure. But one of the cooler stories that I think will emerge from this class, especially on the offensive line, is Jake Cook, a center prospect out of Westerville North High School here, suburban Columbus, maybe 5 minutes away from where I live. Jake was on the recruiting radar pretty early. He picked up some offers pretty early in his high school career, freshman, sophomore year. But I don't think anyone ever knew kind of where his recruitment was going as far as like position. Was he going to be a tackle? Is he going to be an interior guy? I think by his junior year, people figured he was going to be an interior guy. Then it became a deal of like, okay, so he's clearly a power four guy. Is Ohio State gonna jump here? And for a while they didn't. And then they saw him at camp, and he put together a really good camp performance. This is a kid who worked extremely hard on his body, on his quickness, just a guy who constantly worked to improve himself. I saw the improvement. We had seen him, I think, like after his freshman year. We had seen him at a bunch of camps, and we saw him, for 3 or 4 years. We saw him over and over at different settings, different camps. And just always looked like a kid who was working hard to get better, never shied away from competition, just kept doing these just kept showing up to college camps, to recruiting camp, whatever you want to call it. It didn't really matter. If there were going to be other good players there to go against and try and get a little bit better that day, he was going to be there. So to me, one of the best competitors they signed in this class. But Kevin, is this a little bit of like almost like a Darren Lee story in terms of just like not accepting no from Ohio State and just continuing to like show the improvement and just like work for the offer?
They had Terry McLaurin. I mean, certainly there have been guys through the past that have gone through and done that. I mean, but we've also seen guys that have been committed elsewhere and then still try to get that Ohio State offer and it doesn't come in, and you feel bad in that type of situation. But we're dealing with limited numbers. But to Jake Cook's credit, I mean, he did the work to earn the offer. He did the work to get the no turned into a yes. And that's credit to Cook and his work ethic and recognizing what his goal was. And that was to be a member of the Ohio State football team. And, he's done it. And now with, getting his paperwork in, he's, official until comes point of getting a black stripe off and everything else, the 17 layers of officially becoming an Ohio State football player. But, sometimes you got to get these in-state guys. You got to get these local guys. I just think that it's important. I mean, we're here in the shadow of what happened last Saturday, and everybody's still very upset. And, maybe if there were more people who understand what the rivalry means, well, nobody wants to lose a game or whatever. But, Jake Cook is certainly somebody who in his, I'm assuming he's 17 years old, and his 17 years on this earth has seen more than a couple of Ohio State Michigan games. Probably, hasn't seen a positive outcome here in the last 4 years now. So that's, not fantastic, but I digress. I don't want it to turn into one of those types of show. This is about Jake Cook and his big moment. I think that it's, I think it's a huge get as Ohio State continues to try and find the right personnel in the offensive line room, because the depth has been tested here in 24. And while thinking that maybe you will have like 2 fully functioning lines and then a couple of spares, maybe far-fetched in today's climate, you certainly do want to have guys that, you're not having to change people's positions and do all this other stuff. It's tackle goes out, tackle goes in. You're not moving a guard to tackle and a center to guard and then back to center and everything else that's going on there.
Yeah, you got to have 8, I think. Like, yeah, having 12, like, playable, in terms of playable depth at all times is not possible with the portal and NIL and everything at this point. No one has that, but you got to have 8. you got to have your starting five. You got to have a backup tackle. You got to have a backup, and you got to have, probably maybe either two backup tackles and one backup interior guy with some versatility, or one backup tackle and two interior guys that, guard centers. You got to have playable depth. Ohio State obviously had their playable depth tested this year very much with losing their two best offensive linemen during the course of the season. But, Cook is going to give them some, I think, immediate center depth. I like how he's coming in here in terms of the setup. They are not loaded at center right now. We don't know what center is going to look like next year. Is Carson Hinsman going to be the center again? Is Carson Hinsman going to move to guard? And you elevate Josh Padilla, which obviously elevates Jake Cook a little bit earlier from day one. But this is a kid who can come in and, be on the 2 or 3 deep certainly on the 3 deep, but maybe even on the 2 deep as a center, depending on what Ohio State decides to do this offseason. So he's probably going to need to be ready to go a little bit. But again, I love the work ethic and I love the improvement he showed over the course of his high school career, and focusing on his body, focusing on quickness, and just because he's a very powerful, tough kid. But I think he realized, I also have to have some quickness. And so he reminds me a little bit of Pat Elflein. Came out of Pickerington North several years ago, had a great career at Ohio State. I think there's some similarities there. But as we roll the tape here, just a kid who finishes blocks, really tough, hard-nosed guy there. Plays, again, as many top-level prospects do. You'll see him play a lot of offensive tackle in high school. Most high school programs, they just put their best offensive lineman at tackle, at left or right tackle, and that's that. So has plenty of experience playing tackle, which I think will give him a good understanding of the entire function of the offensive line, because it is such a cohesion thing with the offensive line. So having that experience, kind of being able to play all over the line, I think will be helpful. But again, a mean, tough kid in the run game. The pass pro stuff is kind of the thing I think he really worked on as a midway through his high school career. Started really focusing on his feet and just his pass sets and everything else. Obviously, that'll be a little bit of a different thing playing center versus playing tackle in terms of his pass protection and what's required there. But again, a kid with plenty of experience in pass protection at this point, and moving inside should only help him, I think, in that regard. But again, tough leadership, like all these things that I think people want to see out of an Ohio State offensive lineman are there, and we know he's going to work at anything else that isn't there. So an underrated, underappreciated pickup here probably, but I think a guy who will eventually be a starting center at Ohio State.
Yeah, and that's important because we have gone through a couple of cycles of, well, this guy's going to be the center of the future. No, this guy's going to be the center of the future, and it hasn't necessarily come to pass. And Carson Hinsman draws the short straw and ends up having to be the center because they just didn't necessarily have the depth. And then when somebody leaves earlier than expected, Luke Whippler, then you kind of are thrown into the fire at that point. But, I think that Cook's versatility of playing tackle in high school, which is not the same as playing tackle in college, but I think that he is somebody who certainly can play, moving forward, 3 of the offensive line positions, either guard or center. Don't know if I necessarily want him out there in space at the collegiate level, but, he was not a take for a long time in his recruitment, and then suddenly he was. So obviously, don't bet against this kid.
Yeah, I think there's a good history there of guys who worked as hard as Jake Cook did for an offer, of those guys panning out. I mean, it's not 1,000%, 100%, whatever, but it's a high percentage. If we look at the guys who have kind of put themselves through the rigors that Jake Cook put himself through to earn the offer, those guys have more often than not panned out well for Ohio State. So there's a lot to like here, and he'll go well with some of the other guys they've landed in this class that we're talking about here on the channel. And you guys can check all those out here throughout the day at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. But that'll do it for this one. Buckeyes have their, we think, center of the future in Jake Cook, but a very, very good interior offensive lineman prospect who will give them some much needed toughness and versatility up there in the trenches. So thank you everyone for watching and listening. Check us out at BuckeyeHuddle.com, $4.99 for your first month. And we will see you again back here with some more capsules.